Hi, I'm Christy Tolley, a pediatrician with Hoag Medical Group. I've been lucky enough to be practicing with Hoag for about 5 years now. I've been practicing pediatrician for about 20 years in the Huntington Beach area. So I've been around here for quite a while, and I've raised 3 kids of my own. So I've kind of been through all the things I'm going to be talking about with you today. So today's topic is just some tips and tricks for raising a happy and healthy toddler. So the toddler years are super exciting. I mean, it's so fun to watch your kid grow up and change and develop. But on the other hand, that comes with a lot of things that can be really frustrating. You know, they really challenge you and test our parenting skills. So hopefully today I can help you understand why they're doing some of that and the developmental process. So to get to all the details of, kind of sleeping, toilet training, I think the biggest thing we need to go through is development and understand why these behaviors are happening. And so you can see there on the list, we'll talk about the sleep disturbance, toilet training, the tantrums, picky eating, some separation anxiety, discipline. But first I'm going to go through sort of the development and we'll go from there. So if you think about the difference between sort of being an infant and then to 1, and then especially the jump between 1 and 3, there's a huge growth spurt when it comes to the physical development. So at 1 year, they're just starting to.
Sorry, can you pause for a second? Sorry, it last second just crashed on us.
Hi, I'm Christy Tolley, a pediatrician with Hoag Medical Group. My office is in Huntington Beach off of Beach in Yorktown. I've been working there now for about 5 years, but have been in the Huntington Beach area for about 20 years. So I have 3 kids of my own. I have, so I've been through the toddler years and kind of everything we're about to talk about today. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the live chat, and I'll get to those questions at the end, okay? So my topic today is tips for raising a happy toddler, and I'd add a happy and healthy toddler to that. Oh, there we go. So the first thing, sorry, let me go back here. So raising a toddler, they're having a huge growth in both physical, cognitive, all kinds of development going on. So although it's super fun and exciting to see your kid growing and changing, it can also be really frustrating at times. So I think to understand why all these behaviors are happening, the first thing we need to do is understand their development. So I'll go through that during the talk, and then we'll address sleep disturbance, some toilet training, tantrums, picky eating, and some separation anxiety. So one of the huge leaps in development are their physical skills. So if you think about, like at 1 year, they're crawling, starting to pull up, they're cruising, then they start walking. By 2 years, they're walking completely independently, starting to run, they're carrying things when they're running, they're climbing stairs, they're climbing chairs, and then by 3, their balance is much better. So they can walk on a small balance beam, they can walk backwards, they can jump on 2 feet. And with those skills aren't necessarily the skills to understand that they're in danger. So with the physical skills, there is a risk of them getting hurt. So we'll go through kind of some of the ways they're developing that way too. So as far as language development goes, when you hit a year, you're usually at about a year, you're saying mama, dada, maybe another word or two. By 15 months, there's usually about 10 words, and they're pointing to some body parts. The 18 months to about 2 years, there's a huge leap in words, and they're saying about 50 words, starting to put words together. And then by 3 years, many kids are talking in complete sentences and often have more than 1,000 words, are able to ask questions and sing songs, and most kids or most strangers can understand about 75% of what they're saying. So there's also a big leap in cognitive development at this age. So about 1 year, they're learning how to use objects appropriately. They can pretend they have a brush, or they can brush their doll's hair or brush their teeth. They're starting to model a lot of the grown-ups' behavior. So if they're sweeping the kitchen, they'll want to play along and do that too. They start to play hide and seek and peekaboo, and this is when the separation anxiety really starts to set in, which can be really challenging. And then they're also waiting for a response. So if they do something, then they'll look at you to have a reaction. So if they stand up, they'll look at you and you'll clap, and they'll wait for a response. And then around 2 to 3 years, they start to understand simple time concepts like before and after. So like, we'll go to the park after you have your nap. And so they understand a lot more in that area. They can do some simple jigsaw puzzles. They know cause and effect. They can turn lights on and off. And they understand, things that they're not supposed to do. And you'll see if they go to do something that they're not supposed to, they'll look at you for a response. And then they'll start to string different activities together. They'll like play house. They'll have the doll wake up, they'll put the doll to bed, and do things like that. The problem is at this age also, reasoning can be very difficult. They kind of want the things the way they want it, and that's about it. So now that we sort of have all this information on development, I guess as a practicing pediatrician, I have a lot of parents coming into me, kind of wanting an answer and kind of how to fix the problem or fix the issue, whatever it may be, maybe sleep or picking eating. And so a lot of people, which is normal. Like, the internet is so fantastic for so many things, but I think we're looking sometimes for one answer to a problem. And I think just to remember, every child is different. So you have 2 children, they can have completely different personalities. So there's not always one answer. I think just kind of patience and time and consistency are what matters the most, and what matters for your child. So the first thing, excuse me, I'll go into is sleep regression. So we go through the infant stage, and we have, we spend so much time trying to get them on a great sleep schedule. And then all of a sudden, you hit your toddler years and you go through another sleep regression. The reasons for this are quite a bit different as an infant. So a lot of that is just kind of their developmental leap that starts to affect their sleep. So they're learning, they're growing, they're figuring out that they can have a big impact on their environment. Okay, so they get separation anxiety, and so when you leave the room, they often get upset and sad and are crying, and they want you to be in the room until they fall asleep. Being overtired as a toddler is very common. Their nap schedules are changing. They go from 2 to 3 naps down to 1 nap, and so that transition can make it very hard to get them to sleep. They're also getting much more independent, so they understand that now they can crawl out of their crib or their toddler bed and come and get you and go to the door, so that makes sleeping very difficult. This is often a time when the families have new siblings coming, and so they may get a new little brother or sister, teething still happening, and with that, their growth in cognitive or mental abilities, also fears start to happen. So they get afraid to be alone or afraid of shadows and things like that, which makes it harder for them to sleep. So there's some tricks that you can do. I will say consistency is really the key to getting your child to sleep. So I would view sleep training, it's kind of sleep training once as an infant, and then you sleep train again as a toddler. The advantage of toddlers, they start to understand what you need to do. So just let them know exactly, that what you want them to do. Reassure them that you're going to be right next door. So at nighttime, say, it's time for bed. We sleep at night. I'll get you in the morning, but you need to stay in your bed. And so if you repeat that enough, eventually they'll understand and start to go along with that. But consistency is really the key. The other thing I think is not overreacting. It gets tough when we're tired and we know we have to work the next day and our toddler keeps getting up. But the less emotion you show, just give them a quick hug, bring them back to their room, and put them back in their bed and say, I'll see you in the morning, and be as calm as you can. And then the other thing is, if they start crying in the room, give them a moment. Let them see if they can put themselves back to sleep. If they can self-soothe, that's going to be the best bet. We all have these kind of sleep-wake cycles throughout the night. And if they have that wake cycle, if they can learn to kind of turn over, get comfortable, and put themselves back to sleep instead of you coming in and holding them, that's going to help a lot. So the other thing with toddlers is they get more independence. They're going to want to test their boundaries a lot. So again, it's the being calm and consistent and repeating yourself that it's nighttime is time for sleep and you need to stay in your bed until we come get you, And then keeping them busy throughout the day is also super important. You want to keep them busy so they're tired at night. So going to the park, or if they're in preschool, is something that is helpful. And then trying to eat healthy, regular meals, and kind of trying to keep the junk food, the snacks, to a limit. And then usually, if you're really consistent, you're going to, in about 1 to 3 weeks, they're going to start sleeping much, much better. And so that, so if you keep that in mind, know this is just a phase, and you're going to get through this too. So the next challenge I think that I get asked about a lot is toilet training. First of all, how do you know when they're ready to toilet train? They often show signs around 18 months. They can tell you that they're wet or dirty, but then you go to train them and they're not quite ready. So, and often they'll show interest and then kind of regress a little bit. So some of the things that, some of the indications on how you know they're ready is they should be able to explain their needs, their basic needs verbally. So even if it's asking for a glass of water, or saying that, telling you that there's poo-poo in the diaper, or that they're wet and they need to be changed, those things are going to help you be successful. They also need to have the motor skills, so they need to sit, be able to sit independently on the toilet. They need to be able to get up and down from the toilet, or the little potty chair, and they need to be able to pull their clothes off and on. So I think those are some of the big ones, And I think also, to help prepare them, if they're able to, watch the parents in the bathroom, it makes a big difference too. So if they meet all those requirements and you feel like you're ready to start the process of toilet training, here's some of the things that I would suggest. Is first, you want to get the potty chair. And remember, the potty chair doesn't necessarily have to be in the bathroom, and it can be somewhere that's a little that's very convenient for them to get to, and it's easy access. So have them get familiar with the potty chair before trying to have them sit there. If you try to kind of force them on there, they'll develop some fears of that as well. And then if they are showing fear, I would just take a step back, keep the chair there. Eventually they'll show interest and want to use it. The first step would be to have them sit there in clothes and, in their diaper, and get used to that. And then the second step would be, to develop a routine and to sit them on there every night before bath time, maybe when they're naked, and hopefully eventually they'll start using the potty. Another thing I think that kids have a fear of is when they go to the bathroom, kind of what happens to it. They get really confused. So if you take the stool or the pee from the potty chair and kind of dump it in the toilet, and then you flush it and you kind of wave by and make it a game, then that's really fun too. And they have a lot of great toilet training books out there too that you can read with your child to get them ready. So the biggest challenges I see with toilet training are really a lot of it comes from trying to force it a little bit before they're ready. A lot of kids, for some reason, are afraid to go have a bowel movement into the toilet. So if you notice this happening, they're having fear, they're holding their stool, then just take a step back for a couple weeks and then restart again. So if you start to see that your child, the biggest thing is constipation. They start to have stool holding, and they can hold it for a long time, so it gets a little stressful for parents. And what happens is then they try to go to the bathroom. It's very hard and it's painful, and it kind of turns into this bad cycle of being afraid to use the toilet, and so it makes it very difficult to toilet train. So if there is constipation, just make sure you're doing your best to cure that before you push forward with the toilet training. So to help with that, you just a healthy diet, lots of fruits and veggies. Fiber is super important. So the general rule of fiber is 5 grams per day plus your child's age. So for a 2-year-old, it'd be like 7 grams of fiber. You don't want more than 24 ounces of milk or so. And lots of water. If they get really hard and stools and they're constipated, just a little bit of juice to help that soften up the stools can help as well. And also to keep in the back of your mind, when you're toilet training, using a reward process is much better. So, you know, every time they go, maybe put a marble in a jar, and eventually if they get in 5 marbles, they get a little toy. You may want to keep a little basket of toys, and if they accomplish their goal, they get a little toy. So the next thing I'll talk about is tantrums. So I know I've been here for sure. So tantrums can be really frustrating. And I think the biggest thing to remember is that it's a super normal part of development. And they seem to happen always at the worst times. But, you know, if you just remain calm and handle them really consistently, they tend to disappear really quickly. So they start usually around 12 months. And they go for about 3 years, and some kids just tend to tantrum more than others. Some might have a more aggressive personality, others are super mellow. So just depending on the kid, some will tantrum more than others. And I think the more gracefully and calmly you handle the tantrums, the quicker they'll get through that. So some of the things that can help you with the tantrums is just make sure you're catching them being good. So toddlers are very reactionary. So whether you're giving them positive attention or negative attention, that's what they're going to go with. So the more you catch them being good and praising their good behavior, the more they're going to try to do that so that they can grab your attention. And often, because of this kind of independence, what it is really is they want to control you, right? Or they want to control their environment, and they're learning that they can do that. So giving them choices of what they want. So if you're fighting over food, you can offer them a choice. Would you rather have the apple or the banana? And some of those things can help stop the tantrums as well. So the younger they are, it's easier to use distraction. You can move them to a different room, offer them a different toy. But as they get older, that can be a little bit more difficult, and you have to set more limits, and we'll go through that a little bit as well. But again, consistency is really important. So as they get older, some of the things that you want to do is set some very specific ground rules. So this is more like at 2 or 3, I think, than it is at 1. So you want to have a zero tolerance policy for any hitting, kicking, any biting or throwing. Some of the things you can do with that are timeouts, which we'll talk a little bit about. And I would say have a plan. So make sure you're not putting them in a situation that's going to be tough. So don't take them out when they're super tired, or it's time for a nap, or when they're hungry. You know, make sure you're sort of prepared for what's happening. Make sure you bring snacks with you. Make sure they're well rested before you kind of run your errands and do that kind of thing. And despite doing everything correctly, kids are still going to tantrum. So just make sure, you know, if that's happening a lot, just take a break if you need it. Call for help. Call a friend. Get some family involved, and make sure you step away if it gets to be too much. And then remember, again, it's just a phase like anything. So after 3 years old, they become much less frequent and things get much better. All right. So picky eating is another thing that really starts to happen at this age. And again, it's kind of going back to the development we talked about. They just become more independent. They want what they want. So this is often a very challenging time for eating. So some of the biggest things I would say even prior to the toddler years are to make sure that you're giving your kid a large variety, of food. So when they're real young and you start the foods, make sure there's a lot of different fruits and vegetables and things that you're offering, because every toddler will start to limit that diet. So if you're starting from a wider base, you're going to be, even though they're going to limit some foods, you're still going to have much more variety in there. So so the first year of life, they're going through a rapid phase of growth. They're going to be doubling their body weight by like 6 months. And so after a year, that rate of growth really starts to slow down. And so that's the time they tend to become less picky. They're not eating as much. They're not necessarily eating those 3 meals a day like we would want them to. So you have to pay attention to that, and I think it's important that they learn their signals and make sure kind of you're feeding them when they're hungry. It may not necessarily be those 3 meals a day. This is the age where they're also developing the food preferences. They know what they like and what they don't like. So you want to keep putting, the foods that they like and the foods they don't like on the plate, because it can change from one day to another. One day they may eat tons of strawberries. The next day they say they don't like it. And then 3 days later they want strawberries again. So just make sure you keep offering those foods even if they don't seem interested that day. And I think the other thing is just to not get frustrated. Put a healthy choice on. If you go to choosemyplate.gov, that's on the slide there. That can give you a lot of tips on kind of types of foods and things that you can feed your child and how portions and things like that. But the main thing is not to get frustrated. If they don't seem hungry, you can take the plate away and then offer it later. You just don't want to get in the habit of offering them only the things that they want to eat, because eventually you'll get down to 2 or 3 items, and usually they're not going to be the healthy picks. So just keep putting everything on the plate, and they'll phase through that too. So here's some of the things that you can do to kind of help encourage all of that. It's kind of a busy slide, so I'm not going to go through everything, but sit down and eat as a family. I think that's very important. And even as adults, we get used to watching things sometimes as we're eating, but make sure you guys are sitting together, you're talking, you take away the videos, the TV, all that stuff is off, and you're just spending that time together as family. And again, I already mentioned, don't get into food fights. Just keep offering healthy options and let them eat when they're hungry. Your job as a parent is to really just offer the foods, the healthy foods, not to force them to eat it. So let them make that decision. One bad habit that I see a lot is kind of bribing. So if you eat all your broccoli, you can have a scoop of ice cream. So you really want to avoid that from the beginning. So then it becomes, a reward for kind of the bad food. So just offer the food, and hopefully they'll start taking it more and more. And again, I already went through the keep trying and the offering variety. So some of the things that you can do, and toddlers love this, is just make it really fun. So make it really colorful, be creative. Kids at this age love to dip foods. So you can have a lot of finger foods and dipping. And you can have them, if they go to the store with you, you can have them pick out some of the fruits and vegetables with you, so that if they feel like they're a bit more control. And that, again, that's where the independence comes in. So they'll feel really proud if they can help you with that. So you guys can go through cookbooks together. It's great time together, and you can pick out recipes to try. And they really love to be helpful at this age. So if you scoop things out, you can count ingredients into the bowl. It's great for their growth and development. And, they can help pour and they can help mix. You can get a little stool for them and just make it really fun. And then once they really like something, like if they like broccoli, then you can start incorporating that into mixed foods, because that's a challenge too, is to have toddlers and even a lot of school-age children I find don't like casseroles and foods that are kind of mixed together. They want everything separately. So food bridging is a really important part of that. So once they like a food, then you put that food into something else so that they'll eat all of that. And one thing you can do as well is serve foods that you know they'll eat. Like let's say they love broccoli or cheese. You can sort of combine those foods, and you can put, cheese on the broccoli or cauliflower, whatever it is, and that can help as well. All right, and separation anxiety is something I'm actually seeing a lot of, especially since we've had COVID, and so it seems even more now as people are starting to get back more to regular schedules and daycare and things like that. A lot of parents coming in right now for separation anxiety, because seeing your kid anxious tends to make you anxious, and you feel bad when they're crying and screaming, because it can be pretty dramatic when you're leaving. So it's very common at about 15 to 18 months. It's always worse if they're sick, they're hungry, or they're tired. And as they become more independent, you kind of get this push-pull. They want to be with you, but then if you go get them, then they cry and they want to be away. So just remember, I think the biggest thing is this is a very normal process. It's always worse between 15 and 18 months. And usually by 2, it starts to get a little bit better. And so they can be really loud and tearful. And so it's hard as a parent to kind of stop and ignore that. But we'll talk about some tips on how to make it a bit easier for you and for them. So the first thing would to be make the separation very quick. So be very consistent, make your goodbyes, really short and sweet, pay real attention to them, like, no phones, nothing, just stop, get down on their level, say, I love you, I'll be back. And even if they're crying, just give them a quick hug, say goodbye, and then part if they're going to school or you're running to the store, something like that. And make sure you're consistent as well. So return when you say you're going to return. Try to keep the schedule as specific as you can. Like, I'll be back to pick you up after your nap is over. Like I said, they're starting to understand those time concepts. So you saying you're going to pick them up at 3 isn't very meaningful. But if you say, I'll pick you up after the nap and you have playtime, then that makes a lot more sense to them. So just make sure you're communicating with them as they're developmentally ready. And do some practice runs. So if they're going to be starting daycare, drop them off at a grandparent's or a friend's house for a couple hours before that, so they're used to kind of the coming and going as well. And if it's a school that they're starting, you can drive by the school beforehand, and kind of do a little practice run. This is especially useful, obviously, as you get closer to 2 and 3 when they can understand that. And separation anxiety, it's usually much better by 2, 2.5. And if it lasts longer than that, then you can follow up with your pediatrician. Okay, so discipline is another thing. So despite doing all these things or trying to prevent it from happening, kids are going to act up, they're going to have temper tantrums. So there's different types of discipline depending on their ages and how you want to handle that. So some of the ones that I tend to talk about, are natural consequences. If your child breaks a toy, you sit and explain, look, now the toy's broken, so we have to put it away. And they won't have that to play with. And eventually they'll understand and be a little bit more careful with the toys. Okay, and then there's logical consequences. So you can help, if you ask your child to put away toys and they refuse to help you. And remember, developmentally, they're going to need your help at this point too. But you guys help clean up the toys together. But if they're totally uninterested and aren't helping and going off and doing whatever they want, then they have to have a consequence for that. So maybe they don't get to play with a certain toy for that day. And then withholding privileges works a little bit better as they get older. If they have a favorite toy or favorite book, just kind of put it away and for the day and say, I'm sorry, you didn't help me clean up, so we're going to put this away today and you can have it again tomorrow. Just make sure you're not, withholding anything vital like meals or anything that they actually need. So, and then another option is timeout. So timeouts are very short at this age. It's usually a minute per year of age. So often you'll need to sit there because they're not going to stay where you tell them to stay. So it'll be, have a timeout chair, sit there for a minute, have them face away from you, don't interact, but you may have to physically stay there so they don't get out of the chair once you're done, just explain why they're in the chair, and then redirect them, give them a hug, redirect them to a positive activity. And always make sure you're criticizing, or you're telling the child what they did wrong, not that they're a bad child, so criticize the behavior and not the child. So in summary, basically kind of show your love, show your affection much more than your disciplining. So like I said, catch them being good, give them lots of hugs and kisses. They're going to want to please you. So if you make it a more positive experience, then you're going to be disciplining kind of less often. And they're always going to push the rules and boundaries a little bit. So make sure you prioritize the rules and make it a bit easier for them. So the first things you want to really concentrate on are safety. So, and physical stuff. So you want to make sure, they're not going to go for the plugs and they're not going to pull lamps down. So really child-proofing your home can make you have to discipline less often, because you're not going to have to be constantly saying no or don't do that, and it makes it much easier. So child-proofing is very important. Just limit the temptation for them. And then once they have the safety rules down, you want to make sure there's no biting, anything else. And then really key, and it gets hard because they're testing you really like all day long, the rules, but you have to enforce the consequences. So if they keep doing, you just have to try not to make empty threats, which can be tough, but don't tell them, if you keep doing this, I'm going to take away your toy, and keep saying that, but not actually take away that toy. You're just going to reinforce that negative behavior. So, and I think, this is something to kind of wrap it up here, is if you're a happy, kind of easygoing parent, you're going to raise a happy, easygoing child. The more anxious, angry you are, the more anxious and angry your child's going to be. So I know between work and other children and kind of all the stuff we have to do every day, sometimes this can be a bit challenging, but really work on, the happier you are, the more relaxed your child would be. So happy parents will definitely raise more happy children. So here's, again, some of our office for Hoag Medical Group. Again, I'm Christy Tolley, and our office is in Huntington Beach, off of Beach in Yorktown. If you have any questions, I'll go ahead and answer some of the questions that were coming in today. But if you have any specific questions, you can reach me at the Huntington Beach office as well. So I get this question actually quite a bit. This is kind of the behaviors we don't want. It's like the biting, and it's the hitting. So this question is, my son's 11 months old and bites a lot, so what do you recommend? So again, it's kind of reinforcing. 11 months is tough because you can't reason with them as much. So as much as you can, you don't want to overreact. So you want to stop, get down on their level, and just look at them and say no biting, and try not to give them a huge negative consequence. And just calmly and repeat, just no biting, that hurts, and maybe sit them down in a chair for a few minutes, turn around and do what you're doing, and kind of I don't want to say ignore them, but don't give them excessive attention based on that. So for the timeouts, it's a minute per year of age. So for 1 year, it's only 1 minute. For 2 years, it's only 2 minutes. Okay, the real trick at this age is really trying to, and for 2 minutes for a toddler, that's a long time. So the best bet is to have your timeout chair and to set a timer. So the timer is key, because then they'll hear that buzz and know it's time to get up, and then you can have a discussion on why they were actually in the timeout in the first place. And then just redirect them to a positive, some kind of positive play. All right, so I think we're about out of time. If any questions pop up, and I know this is available to watch later, you can always get a hold of me, and we can talk about things as well. All right, so I really hope you enjoyed the talk today, and enjoy being part of Hoag Medical Group. Thanks.